The following is a presentation of ROI. Welcome to the Doc Owen Show, a fast-paced discussion of what you're doing about local and national issues that affect all of our lives. Phone lines are open at 210-308-8867 or toll-free 866-308-8867. Now, here's your host, Doc Owen.
Howdy, folks. This is Doc Owen. It is Thanksgiving Eve, Wednesday night, the 26th of November. I know that the it's the 27th. Got to set my watch. The announcer gave you the phone numbers. Ignore those for this show only. Here's why. I told you last week that this would be a recorded message. We would do some history of Thanksgiving, and unlike the current administration, I have done what I said I would do. This is a recorded message. So there won't be anybody there to answer the phones. I'm going to try not to throw out controversial issues so that you will be prompted to call. This is Thanksgiving Eve. You should be in the kitchen or finished in the kitchen and sitting in front of a fire, reading a book, taking a break. That's what this is about. So that's the reason I recorded it, so I could join you in those festivities on Wednesday night. I did what I want to do and trained to do, and that is research Thanksgiving. I obviously went to Wikipedia. I'll give you some information from there. I went to ask.com. You may not be familiar, but in addition to the standard Google search, there is a search called Google Scholar, and that gives you what are called peer-reviewed articles. In other words, it's writings by usually other PhDs for PhDs. It's extremely verbose, but they've done the research, they have the references, their information has been reviewed by other PhDs before it is published, so it's considered to be a little more accurate, considerably more accurate than hearsay or than CNN or Today or unfiltered information that you get. So I have an article that we will probably close with that is from a peer-reviewed article that I found extremely interesting. I hope you will find it the same. It will tie all the previous information that I'm going to give to you together. We all know from a family perspective what Thanksgiving is. I hope that to be a true statement. This entire show is going to assume that that is a true statement. It's a family gathering. It's a time that everybody puts an awful lot of issues aside and sits down to have conversations about bigger issues and things that go on in life and not get caught up in the petty day-to-day activities. It is technically a day to give thanks for originally the bounty that was provided in terms of the harvest. However, it actually started as a day to give thanks for any major event, a major victory on a battlefield, the coming of a rain after a long drought. In other words, Thanksgiving Day was set aside or called upon on numerous occasions for numerous events. In approximately, according to the history books, 1621 in the United States, the first Thanksgiving Day was held between the Pilgrims and the Indians. And most of you know that was in Plymouth Rock in Massachusetts. There are two accounts for that I will go over, one of which is the story that you know. It was a bountiful harvest that the Pilgrims had brought in. They felt the need to thank their Indian hosts who had helped them bring in such a good bounty. So they had a big feast, and everybody brought something to the feast. There were, all accounts that I read, always used the same number, which I find interesting. There were 58 pilgrims and 90 Indians at that first event. There were 2 of those Indians that actually spoke English, that had been put into slavery by the Spaniards at one point in time and by the French. And so but in the course of that, they learned to speak English because they had to go through England to get there. They were sold into slavery in those countries, but actually captured by British and taken over there. So that made it a little bit easier to communicate for the people that landed in the Massachusetts area. A little known fact that I wasn't aware of. Let me read to you from an article, the bit that I found in Wikipedia. The event that Americans commonly call the first Thanksgiving was celebrated by the Pilgrims after their first harvest of the New World in 1621. This feast lasted 3 days and was attended by, I misstated, so now I am like the administration. There were 53 pilgrims. I said there were 58, my bad, and 90 American Indians. The New England colonists were accustomed to regularly celebrating Thanksgivings, in quotes, days of prayer, thanking God for blessings such as military victory or the end of a drought. So this was nothing new to them. Further on in that article, it states that historically, none of these had any influence over the evolution of the modern United States holiday. The American holiday's true origin was this New England Calvinist Thanksgiving. Never coupled with a Sabbath meeting, the Puritan observances were special days set aside during the week for thanksgiving and praise in response to God's providence. It's very much was originally tied to religion. Not a religion, religion in general. That's the last article that I want to read to you that I hope you find as interesting as I did. There it is. So we go from 1621, where basically the players were the governor and the wife of the governor and 2 English-speaking Indians. There's something, if you go out there and Google, you'll find a thing called The First Thanksgiving by Terrell Smith. And it's a little one-act play that's kind of interesting, that talks about how that particular sect of folks that came over here were actually had fled England because of English persecution. They went to Holland. Because of religious persecution. They went to Holland where they had religious freedom, but they didn't necessarily have economic freedom. So they blew out of Holland again in order to get their religious freedom. And one of the things I also learned as a part of doing this reading was that the first pilgrims that came over here, the 1621 group, up until about 1623, operated their particular part of the country as a commune. They were communist. They believed that everybody worked and all of the harvest went into a big bucket and was divided out evenly. That didn't work too well. They found that it just didn't work, that some people got lazy, some people didn't work at all, others did all they could. It just didn't make everybody as happy as they thought it would. So they changed that to basically what we know as free enterprise. The government still owned the land, but each person was given a specific parcel upon which to do their own growing and out of which they could keep what they got. And that worked out very much better and has continued till this day. That's exactly how it works. Even to the point that the government owns the land, that's why you pay taxes, is to maintain the right to work that land. You can resell the land, you can do things with it, but there are always taxes that are paid to the government for the use of the land. So that was just a little aside that came up during all of this research. Let me read to you what I found. I think it came out of my peer review stuff. It's called Thanksgiving Day, A True History. How are we doing on time? Okay. Before I dive into this, so it'll flow a little better when I get back, let's take our standard quarter-hour break, and I'll be back in a minute. Thanks.
Harris County, Texas doesn't have a Department of Corrections. It has a Department of Gender Corrections. Hello, I'm Tony Perkins with the Family Research Council in Washington. In Texas, one jail is rewarding people who break the laws of nature. Last week, the third largest jail in the country surprised everyone by announcing that it would let inmates, not biology, dictate whether they're housed with males or females. Officials say the decision was made to accommodate transgenders, but there appears to be absolutely nothing stopping straight inmates from taking advantage, since anatomy has nothing to do with determining your gender in the eyes of this prison. Providing protective areas in prison for vulnerable individuals is one thing, but this policy goes beyond the ridiculous. It's an unsafe policy. Sexual assault is already through the roof in U.S. prisons, and this loophole only encourages predators to lie. What's more, political correctness should be the last thing jails are worried about. Security, not sensitivity, should always come first. For more, go to TonyPerkins.com.
Howdy, folks. This is Doc Owen. Welcome back. Hope you didn't get so engrossed in the show and burn the cookies or the dressing, so pay attention. This is our Thanksgiving Day review, our Thanksgiving celebration on Thanksgiving Eve. I'm glad to be with you, very glad to be with you. I've got an article here called Thanksgiving Day, The True History, by a gentleman by the name of Fred Foldvary, Foldvary, that I found under Google Scholar. Some of this is going to be repetitive of what you just heard that was from Wikipedia, but that's okay, because it goes with the flow of the article. You need to get the feel of not only what he's saying, but how he's saying it, I think. The Pilgrims landed in 1620 and founded the colony of New Plymouth in what is now Massachusetts. They had a difficult first winter, but survived with the help of the Indians. A little different from the story of having a large bounty. Actually, the Indians provided a lot of the food for the first event. There was indeed a big feast in 1621, but it was not a Thanksgiving Day. This 3-day feast was described in a letter by the colonist Edward Winslow. It was a hunting party with the Indians, but there was no Thanksgiving Day proclamation, nor any mention of a Thanksgiving in 1621 in any historical record. So that would appear to refute what we have in Wikipedia. The history of the colony was chronicled by Governor William Bradford in his book of Plymouth Plantation, available at many libraries. Bradford relates how the Pilgrims set up a communist system in which they owned the land in common and would also share the harvests in common. By 1623, it became clear this system was not working out well. The men were not eager to work in the fields, since if they worked hard, they would have to share their produce with everyone else. The colonists faced another year of poor harvest. They held a meeting to decide what to do. As Governor Bradford describes it, at last, after much debate of things, the governor gave way that they should set corn, every man for his own particular. That had very good success, for it made all hands very industrious. So much more corn was planted than otherwise would have been. The Pilgrims changed their economic system from communism to individual enterprise. The land was still owned in common and could not be sold or inherited, but each family was allocated a portion